AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets in flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brian Schmuck, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of, I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Welcome, Couch Coach Nation. Rivalry Weekend is the happiest time of the year. I love watching all these games, from the Navy-Memphis game Thanksgiving night to all the football Friday and again on Saturday. What a great showcase of college football. We're going to get right to the games that we previewed. To me, not a lot of surprises over the weekend. Perhaps the best game of the weekend many might have missed, but Cal beats SMU 38-35. They combined for 35 fourth quarter points. AV, did any one single game jump out to you?
I thought that was a really good one. I honestly thought the Iron Bowl was really good. A lot at stake. Auburn playing for pride, obviously, and trying to ruin Alabama's season. Came down to the last drive. I thought that was really good. I thought LSU Oklahoma was entertaining. It's a rock fight, but it was a close game. The early slate on Saturday wasn't. Miami Pitt was a blowout. The Notre Dame game was a blowout. So it had the making. It started out slow, but there were some great games that night for sure.
To touch on the coaching carousel, Alex Golesh, he was going to Arkansas, but nothing was signed. Auburn didn't get maybe their top couple of choices and turned their attention and now got Alex Golesh. Arkansas, they moved on to Memphis's Ryan Silverfield. It's going to be interesting for me to see how that shapes up. Mike Norvell, who Silverfield replaced, has had one good year at Florida State and nearly got run out this year. They'll be on a scorching hot seat next year. Norvell replaced Justin Fuente, who went to Virginia Tech and lasted 6 seasons before getting fired, and he's been out of football since 2023. So not the best track record for Memphis head coaches going on to bigger jobs. We'll see how that works out for the Hogs. LSU, they got their man in Lane Kiffin, ended what seemed to be a much longer soap opera than what was actually needed. Florida, they lost out on a couple of candidates. Of course, they'll probably tell you that they were in the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes the whole time, but they got their guy in Jon Sumrall, a group of 5 coach from Louisiana who's replacing Billy Napier, a group of 5 coach from Louisiana. We'll see how that goes. I think Florida missed the boat not hiring Jed Fish from Washington. I think they're going to regret that. And come 2030, when they're hiring another coach again, that's probably somebody that they'll wish they would have had. Then you got Pete Golden. He's getting the Ole Miss job. He was their defensive coordinator. Ole Miss didn't waste any time. They named him the head coach, not just interim. He's the head man. Michigan State fired Jonathan Smith, who we talked about mid-season probably wasn't going to be back next year. Michigan State's wasting no time in hiring Pat Fitzgerald. Early on, this might be one of my favorite matches of a coach and a university and how those two are going to come together. This is the first wave of hires. You got to wonder what Penn State's doing. It's obvious in coaching circles, this isn't the job that Penn State thought it was. This is clearly a low tier 2, maybe even a tier 3 job. AV, any thoughts on the coaching carousel?
But it's interesting that Florida ended up hiring Sumrall. I think he's a decent coach. These things are all crapshoots, but I don't think he was their first choice. They really pressed the issue to get him to sign when they did, because I think they were afraid of a Golesh situation where they lose out on their second choice. Penn State is fascinating to me. They were the first ones to make a move. They fired a very successful coach, albeit he had his flaws for sure. And I get that sometimes a coach is just at a place so long, they're not taking it to the next level. There's some staleness. I don't blame Penn State for making a move, but to be the first ones in the market and not seem to have a high profile, high level coach in line yet, it'd be concerning to me if I was a Penn State fan.
Couldn't agree more. Well, let's get into the games that we previewed them last week. We've got clean old-fashioned hate. Georgia won this game 16-9. Georgia Tech surprised me in this game, both on offense and defense. On offense, they couldn't find the end zone. They got 3 field goals, and that's it. This is an offense that's been prolific most of the season. Kudos to Georgia for being able to put the clamps on them. Again, kudos to Georgia Tech, though, and their defense. That's a unit that we really questioned coming into this game. They were giving up points left and right. Pitt did whatever they wanted against this Georgia Tech defense. I'm sure if you asked Brent Key before the game, if his defense only gives up 16, will you win? He would take that and say yes, absolutely. But Georgia, they held Tech to just 69 yards rushing. One of the more impressive rushing defensive games I've seen in a while. Georgia just dominated them. This game, it didn't have a lot of excitement, but it wasn't boring either. Georgia was just dominant on defense, above average to maybe average on offense, just kind of did what they needed to. They held the ball 11 more minutes than Tech, and it was hard for Tech to get into any sort of rhythm.
This was no offense at all on either side. I think Georgia Tech really had a bit of an epic collapse down the stretch. I think they were 8-0, 9-0 at one point. They needed to win one game, one of the 2 that they lost against teams they should have beat to get in the ACC championship. They couldn't get that done, and then they just couldn't get anything going versus Georgia. They just stumbled and bumbled across the finish line of the season. You look at these stats, 260 total yards for Georgia. Gunnar Stockton threw for 70 yards. Like, what's going on? 250 total yards for Georgia Tech. They rushed for less than 70 yards. It's one of those games where you play the game for a reason. It didn't turn out. I thought Georgia would score in the 40s and Georgia Tech would score like 28, something like that. It wasn't that at all. It was, like you said, it wasn't boring for sure. But man, what a different game than I anticipated.
As you mentioned, Tech, they started 8-0. They lost 3 out of 4 down the stretch. Totally gave away every opportunity for the ACC championship game, for the playoffs. They just couldn't find themselves in the last quarter of the season. Texas, they have found themselves. They won against their rival, Texas A&M, 27-17. A&M finally played an SEC team with a pulse, and look what happened. They built their record beating up on the bottom of the SEC. To me, this is additional proof that the conferences are too big. Texas A&M's going to be in the playoff, but I'll go on record right now and say whoever they play in that opening game, they're going to lose. They built their record on the bottom half of the SEC. They haven't beaten anybody good since Notre Dame by 1 point back in September, and Notre Dame might get left out of the playoff. Texas, they got their big win versus their rival. However, it does not and should not put them in the playoffs. It's something to build on as a team for next year. It's something for Arch to build on. I was really surprised with Texas's ability to run the ball. I called them a finesse team. I said that they were soft. If this was a physical game, A&M would win. And they rushed for 218 yards as a team, led by Quintravian Wisner's 19 carries and 155 yards. Even Arch got in with a 35-yard touchdown run to seal the game. He had a total of 53 yards on the ground. Texas, they didn't have the season that they were looking for or what we expected out of them preseason 1 or 2 team in the country. They've got a lot coming back, and I think this is going to be a formidable team next year. They get Ohio State in Austin. They avoid Georgia and Bama, and their toughest SEC game is going to be a trip to Baton Rouge with Lane and his Ole Miss transfer squad. AV, what did you see when you watched Texas and A&M?
Yeah, another bit of a surprising game. I remember when Texas played Florida, they couldn't get the ground game going. I thought Texas A&M's defense was really good this year, and they just ran all over them, which was surprising. Arch Manning didn't have his best game, wasn't his worst game, but he continues to progress, I think, as a quarterback. I'm not as down on A&M as you are in terms of just assuming they're going to lose their first round game because they have a lot of playmakers still. And I know it didn't show up. It showed up at times, but it didn't show up enough on Friday. But when you got those guys on the outside, Marcel Reed playing quarterback, you can score points against most teams and possibly put yourself in position to win. But going undefeated is hard, man. They were 11-0. They played a tough, talented Texas team. They didn't get it done. I don't think it's the end of the world. And I also don't necessarily agree with you that Texas is out of the playoff.
We'll have to wait and see how those rankings look after the championship weekend. A lot to be determined there with what happens in the ACC championship game, what happens in the Big 12 championship game, because if BYU BYU gets revenge on Texas Tech, I think Tech is already in, regardless of what happens. If BYU wins, they're in. That's 2 spots for the Big 12. What happens in the ACC could be interesting. If Duke wins, they're probably ranked behind 2 conference champion group of 5 teams. So the ACC could be left out. Does Miami get an at-large spot, or are they out? And you've got James Madison and the winner of North Texas Tulane in there. A lot still to be determined. Right now, as I've got it, I've got 7 teams that are locked in solid. And then we've got a couple more spots to play with depending on how these conference championship games play out, knowing that at least 2 of them are spoken for with conference championships. So you've got 9 there with 3 spots open. And how does it work from there? BYU winning would take a spot away from somebody else.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later for sure, but I don't see how, depending on how the ACC championship plays out, how the 4th or 5th, whatever Miami ended up ranked, ACC team gets an at-large bid. I think that the committee looks for reasons to get an extra Big Ten or SEC team in. They're trying to find a reason to get Texas in, and finishing 4th in your conference in the ACC that could potentially have a 7-5 ACC champion isn't going to get it done for Miami. I think that's the problem with that. If Virginia wins, maybe, but then you're taking 2 from the ACC, and I don't think they want to take 2. So I think Miami's in a tough spot. I think that helps Texas because they're going to hang their hat on, we played Ohio State, we lost by 1 touchdown, we played them tougher than anyone. You're going to count that as our 3rd loss and put us out. That's a fair argument. And then there's a handful of other teams, like you said, depending on how the conference championships shake out. So it'll be fascinating. Feelings will be hurt, but it's always fun.
When we get back to the football that was happening on the field Saturday, Ohio State, Michigan. Ohio State won 27-9, broke a 4-game losing streak to Michigan. This game can be summed up quickly. Ohio State's defense dominated and is the best defense in the country. They've let up 93 points all season. Number 2 in the nation is Indiana at 131 points. They get to face each other in the Big Ten championship game. Man, I cannot wait for that game. I hope it lives up to the expectations that I'm already building up in my mind for that game. Michigan, they went up 6-0 with 2 field goals, and you just felt seeing this that one of these should have been a touchdown. You can't beat Ohio State just kicking field goals, especially that second field goal. It was a 25-yard kick. You need touchdowns to beat Ohio State. Julian saying he did what he always does. He was efficient, took care of the ball, modest 233 yards, but they didn't need more out of him. He had a total of 3 touchdown passes, 2 really pretty passes, a 35-yarder to Jeremiah Smith, and a 50-yard touchdown to Carnell Tate. I've seen Michigan play a lot this year, and I'm not impressed with all-world recruit Bryce Underwood. I get Michigan's identity is to run the ball, but you've got to be able to have a threat in the passing game, and I don't think that Underwood scares any defensive staff when they're game planning Michigan. He really needs a big offseason to develop his skills, reading defenses, developing his passing game to come back next year a different player. If he doesn't take a big step next year, Michigan's got a long road ahead of them because right now I don't see it under Underwood. I'm giving him a bit of the benefit of the doubt because he's only a freshman and you've got time to mature and grow into that. But for everything that he was built up to be, he is a good running back playing quarterback and not really great at anything. AV, what did you see in this game?
To defend Bryce Underwood, I'm the type of guy, I think a lot of the blame that goes to coaches should go to players. Like sometimes I see coaches putting players in position and they miss the tackle, drop the ball, whatever the case is. But with Underwood, they don't run a passing offense. I don't know that they give him a chance to shine. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I haven't seen enough his first year. Maybe they're catering to his limitations. So I hesitate in placing blame, but I haven't seen them open it up and just let him show what he can do yet. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Julian saying, on the other hand, it is a modest 230 whatever yards, but in those conditions, like it was snowing and that type of game, that he played a good game. And I'll give him credit. He had the interception early that turned into points, and he came back from that poised. I know on this pod, when we've talked week after week, there's been multiple times where I would say such and such team looks like the best team in the country. Texas A&M at one point I thought just looked like the best team in the country. I thought Alabama at one point did. Oklahoma early on, I might have said that about. Currently, I think Texas Tech might be the best team in the country. country. But all of that is a little disrespectful to Ohio State because I think week in and week out, especially with that defense and Julian saying getting better and better, I don't know who beats them. I think that they've been the best team the whole time, and I'm probably just looking for someone else to shine a little bit, but they are a really good football team, man.
They make watching football fun and easy because they do everything really well. They're disciplined, they're well coached, their defense is lights out. They've got offensive skill players. The offensive line is big and strong. They do everything really well. It's hard to find a weakness to exploit. Again, that Big Ten championship game, I hope it's epic because Indiana and Ohio State have looked like the top two teams in the country. And as much of a gap some people might say there is between Ohio State and Indiana, I think there's that gap also between Indiana and everybody else too. So I hope it's a good, close, competitive game. We'll see next Saturday. We'll see. Game balls, I've got two of them to give out. I've got Caleb Hawkins, running back, North Texas, 25 carries, 186 yards, 4 touchdowns, added 2 catches, 28 yards to clinch their berth in the American Conference Championship game. And then Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt quarterback, 18 of 28, 268 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 picks. Kind of a modest day passing. Why is he getting a game ball? It's because he added 20 carries and 165 yards on the ground with another touchdown, over 400 total yards. He did this in a rivalry game at Tennessee, broke a 6-game losing streak to Tennessee. His next outing might be in New York as a Heisman Trophy finalist. AV, how about a game ball?
How about we go to the swamp and give one to Jaden Ball, the running back for Florida, 38 carries. If I was the coach, he might have got 58 carries, 266 yards. He averaged 7 yards a carry, and I think his longest rush was like 20 yards. So he didn't break off a couple of 70-yarders. He shoved it down Florida State's face all night long, early and often. Couldn't be stopped. This isn't a one-off for him. He's a great ball player, good running back. Be interesting to see how his future plays out with a new coach and all that. But he's a solid player, and he earned the game ball from me.
How about a question? You got a question for anybody?
I do. I have one for Rhett Lashley. This could probably be the same question, could probably be thrown at Brent Key too, and maybe more deservedly. But Rhett has one game to win, and he goes to the ACC championship. It's a game against California, against, 20,000 fans or whatever they have out there at the game. And he takes his team out there and can't get it done. It's not necessarily questions about him as a long-term head coach or anything that defines his career, but man, what a missed opportunity. They looked like they weren't ready to play. They finally came back and took the lead, and their defense couldn't hold it. Just a poor effort, I thought, from the defense especially, but the offense took a while to get going and dug themselves a hole where they were playing from behind all night. Didn't like what I saw from SMU. I thought they underperformed in a big moment, and so I got to ask questions to Rhett Lashley, like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I've got questions myself. What are we doing as a sport? We've got conference championship game participants, and they didn't even play half the league. You've got conference championship games that no longer matter because of the playoffs, and there's no benefit to even playing in them. If you're in the playoff, you're likely not dropping out. If you're on the outside looking in, sure, you can get in at the last second, maybe like Virginia, but is that really good for the sport either? The biggest issue is injuries. You play this conference championship game that doesn't really matter, and you lose a star player, and now what does that do to your chances of winning a national title? Why play the game and risk the injury? These games are totally pointless now. The NCAA, they're so slow to make changes. I can't see any change happening for years to come. But the entire college football viewing world knows that these games are a waste. Get rid of them. Start the playoff a week sooner so that the season can end earlier in January and not just drag on. We need lots of changes in the sport, from the playoffs to the conference championship games to the transfer portal to NIL to signing day to massive coaching contract buyouts. We've got a whole off season to dive into all of these topics. Until changes are made, I've got questions.
Those are great questions because I think we are at a point where none of this makes sense anymore. You look at the ACC, and the ACC championship games are being determined by winning percentage against conference opponents because the entire conference doesn't play each other, right? Now, if Duke wins the ACC and let's say the ACC gets shut out of the playoffs, they're going to change that next year to incorporate highest committee college football ranked team is going to get in. So we're at a tipping point where we're about to have college football committee committee rankings determine conference champions. That's insane. That is insanity. Go back to smaller conferences, or at least divisions, where everyone plays everyone and is determined on the field. The more they try to engineer this, the more that we get into rankings and eye tests and politics, shadiness. Go back to smaller conferences, or at least divisions where everyone plays everyone and is determined on the field, and give less and less to a committee and rankings and whatnot, please.
We're in full agreement there. You can follow the Complete BS Pod on X and Instagram. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.
Listen up. If you guys haven't heard of Goldbelly, let me fill you in. Goldbelly ships America's most iconic foods nationwide. Whether it's the one and only Joe's Stone Crab from Miami, legendary steaks from Peter Luger's in New York, or mind-blowing cakes from food icons like Ina Garten or Martha Stewart, Goldbelly's got epic gifts your friends and family will rave about for years. And you can get all of these and more at huge savings and free shipping during Goldbelly's Black Friday sale. So hurry to goldbelly.com and grab these deals while they last.